Want to get into or maybe back into resin printing? Want to see if the current batch of flagship printers have begun to bridge the gap between enthusiast and part-time hobbyist? Want to see if a normalish, non-professional, not at all patient, clumsy fool like myself can get to grips with the current generation of resin printers straight out of the box? Then great, follow along with me as I go through the exact same experience of going from totally zero to totally hero that yourself might be gearing up for. But crap Fox, I thought you only had love for FDM printers, I hear you shout, with all the other screaming voices in my head. Well, let's just say, maybe my head's actually been turned. Hi folks, and no, you've not clicked on the wrong channel. This is indeed a new resin printer here at CrackFox Studios. You're right, I have been an evangelist for 100% FDM prints so far, and hopefully to good success, but also to some pain as well. But don't get me wrong, FDM has really closed the gap on quality figurines and collectibles, making FDM printers a viable and capable option for far more than they used to be. But there are just some things that are beyond what they can do. So when, to my utter surprise and delight, Anycubic reached out to me, seeing if I'd like to have a Photon Mono M7 Pro to try out, I was like, yeah, all right. But I'm not going to bore you with an unboxing because I presume you know how boxes work. So instead, let's get straight to the setup. Actually, sorry, before we get onto the setup, full disclosure, I do have a Photon Mono X and the Wash and Cure Station Plus from about 3 or 4 years ago when I first started the hobby, but I found it inconsistent, messy. Not Anycubic's fault, it's just the way resin printers were in those days, or how they are a little bit now. And I just didn't feel like dedicating the time to the hobby where I've spent so much time cleaning stuff than I did actually building and painting stuff. So hopefully with all the modern features that the M7 Pro comes with, that's going to alleviate some of those issues from the past and get me back into using the resin printer alongside my FDM printers. Massive thanks to Anycubic for sending me the printer to play with and review and see if it's going to fit into the life of somebody who primarily uses FDM. They've not paid me at all to make this review. I've got full creative control. I'll give completely honest feedback to you and to Anycubic, but they have asked if I can just go over the key features and just speak to you about some of the offers coming up too. But just to let you know as well, this is a totally unabridged video diary sort of guide. So it might be a long one. I'm just going to put everything in there as I film myself going through the process that you will go through. So it's not all hip and happening and flashy editing. It's just a record of my authentic and real experience with setting this up and getting the first miniature printed. So the Anycubic Photon Mono M7 Pro. It's got a 14K high precision optical system, has a 0.01mm layer height at up to 170mm per hour. It seems to be able to shave off hours off print time as well when it's set to fast printing. Its LCD screen uses the latest Light Turbo 3 technology, making each beam of light precise and uniform. It's leveling free, which I can attest to. It's got this pretty awesome built-in dynamic temperature control resin vat. It's got an optional resin autofill unit that can fill up your vat prior to printing, as you're printing, and then it can empty your vat after printing for you as well. And it's got a bunch of automatic intelligent detection features. So the Photon Mono M7 Pro, all speed, all spirit, according to Anycubic. And if you end up being interested in getting yourself one of these printers, during Amazon Prime Day, during July 8th to 11th, Anycubic lowest prices of the year on top sellers like the Kobra S1 Combo will be dropping down to as much as $579. Not sure how much that is pounds, I can't bother to work that out. And there's going to be exclusive discounts up to 10% off printers and 15% off filaments and resins. And apparently there's a first hour bonus. Buy a machine and get 4 kilograms of filament or resin for free. If you want to take advantage of that, there is a link down below. I do not get any commission from that. It's just something they wanted me to draw attention to. And not only have they got a range of great printers on offer for everybody, they also have an online community called Make It Online, full of user-generated, incredible prints and STLs for you to peruse at your leisure. Or even make some yourself and upload them, why not? Right, let's get back to my experience of having a go at the Photon Mono M7 Pro. Now, one of the first things I'm quite interested in is the automatic resin refill and fill and empty pump. So plug this into a resin bottle, it fills up the vat for you, keeps it topped up as well. And in the end, it'll empty all the unused resin into your bottle for you. Now, I've heard that these are quite hard to clean and stuff like that, but I think as a beginner, it's probably worth trying because you're probably only going to be using one kind of resin to start off with if you want to keep things simple. So probably don't have to keep rinsing it through to change resin. So I'm gonna give this a go from the get-go, to keep it real, as so to speak. Next up is the rather nicely patterned build plate. This is quite satisfying, taking off of the old plastic cover there. Now, from what I've seen online, this should be sort of pre-leveled rather nicely already from the factory when they do their tests. It's nice, chunky, a little bit of a peak there to let the resin run off nicely. Yep, it's a build plate, all right. Interestingly, if you're new to 3D printing and resin printing, when you go into your slicer and you put your model into slicer, it will appear like this on top of the build plate, face that way, there's my finger, that way. But when you print, it will print like this. So you have to do this sort of mental gymnastics to figure out what is the best way of doing stuff. Moving along now to the rather chunky and quite weighty vat. And it's weighty because of the heater on the side there. This is a bit I'm really excited about because being in England, the weather's not very pleasant most of the time. What I do plan on doing after doing this test is taking this printer and put it in the garage, and because of the heater, it can heat up the resin for me and I don't have to worry about it being bloody cold outside. And from what I hear, the resin sort of gets sucked up potentially through these little gaps. Is that picking up on camera? Yes, you see. I think it goes in there, into the heater, and then comes out the other side and circulates. Don't forget to take off another protective bit of plastic, I'll do that later, with protective cover to go over the LCD screen and a bit of leveling paper. And lastly, you also get a whole load of stuff. Yeah, print instructions. What we got there? We got gloves, a USB pen, various Allen keys. That's the Wi-Fi antenna to do everything. Some wipes and stuff, and a scraper to scrape things off the FEP. If you want to know what the FEP is, that's the FEP. The drum skin type of thing. What else do we get? We get that thing. We get power, all important power, and we get that. Okay, so that is attached. What attaches to these tubes? That goes into your resin bottle, obviously without this little power adapter thing. Bop, bop, bop. Bob's your uncle. You get resin in your vats. A mask in case COVID happens during the printing process. And a scraper in case you want to do some polyfillering, I guess, around the house. No, that actually gets stuff off the build plate when you get support like that. Job's done. Right, I've taken the old protective screen for the LCD panel off. Now it's to put the new one on. This is the one that's actually set up for printing. I'm going to peel back a small section. So I've just seen when I peeled off the protective film that this is ACF film, not FEP. So ACF can be stronger, more durable, can be faster prints. As some people like to change it for FEP, which you can do by taking off all these screws and putting in your new FEP. It's not difficult. It's time consuming, but it's not difficult. So it will remain to be seen. I think because it's a bit cloudy, you get a little bit of a drop in clarity, but I think it's marginal. But as a beginner, don't worry about that at all. Within the little box of goodies, you have these pins to screw that down. Super easy. I'm going to put my baton that just sticks into the USB, sticks into the corresponding USB. Now you can screw that in, if you so wish, with a tiny little grub screw. I'll do that at some point. Next, just attach the build plate with this lovely and sturdy screw. To turn it on, there's a main switch around the back, and then you hold this button down for about 1,000,000 years. And finally, you get life. Install the print platform. It is installed. Install resin vat. Yes. Okay, I'm going to pour some resin in. Let's go. I'm going to go with the usual standard grey boop, boop, boop resin. I was tempted to suggest water washable resin to keep things simpler if you're new, a little bit more accessible. But you're gonna need to know what you need to clean and cure normal resin from the get-go, really. So let's do it that way. But before you handle any resin, make sure to glove up. So that is about a whole kilogram of resin, and we're still comfortably got enough space. You want to make sure that you're on the up-to-date firmware via the OTA upgrade or via the app. I've not tried the local upgrade because I can't seem to find the file online anywhere. It seems to be they're just doing it on the OTA or on their app. I wanted to check whether the heater was switched on, and after running around on ChatGPT for a while and he given me the wrong thing, he was saying to click on other and temperature and saying there should be a setting here saying change temperature, but it's just a keypad. It eventually found that if you go to the USB, you go into the print and you click very hard to see that there is a little scroll, preprint heating. You would think that would be a little bit clearer and a little bit switched on by default, really, because the heater is a big thing. But anyway, let's see what difference it makes. So a bit of a change of plan. I was going to show you how to do this without a wash and cure station, but if I'm going to tell you what is the best way to do this, then it is investing in a wash and cure station. So you're going to have to price that in, I would, if I were you, if you're looking to buy a resin machine and take on this hobby. So just consider that when you're budgeting and when you're setting up your desk, because I've just had to move a load of stuff to fit it on here. So right, let's get it off the build plate, let's get it washed, and let's have a look at the exposures. And I'm probably just going to do a bit of a manual clean. I'm literally just dunking this build plate in and out. So yeah, Anycubic, and if you're listening, hopefully you're listening, I'd really like to test out your new larger wash and cure station someday. So I went away and had a little bit of a look at how to read these RERFs a little bit better, because I presumed that you were after all those things to be perfect and everything else to be kind of neat and tidy and whatnot. But if they're all perfect, but that line of holes there in the middle of the screen, where you can see 5 holes across the top, if that line of holes has got less holes, then this won't fail, but you'll have less detail. As opposed to number 1, where along those lines you now have got 6 holes quite clearly, but you've got failures of these pillars. So you'll get more detail, but your print will fail. So you've got to find the optimum between the two extremes. Number 4 has got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes, and all the pillars look nice and healthy. Number 5, we've dropped to 5 holes. You've got just about the 6th one, but you've dropped. On number 3, you've got the 6 holes, but you've got a failure on the pillar just at the front, second from the right, I believe. Number 4 it is. That was a 2.25 exposure time. I'm now going to go ahead and do a full test of the 2.25 setting using the Cones of Calibration version 3. Let's take a look at the Cones of Calibration. It's a fun little test to just check that your settings are dialed in and correct. You've got all these little bits of detail that will do various things, and it's very clear. Say if for instance this sword, if it goes into the head there, then it fits right. If it doesn't go into some other holes, then it's not calibrated right. All that kind of stuff. And just going to check any of the settings I might need to tweak. Right, because we're not printing an STL straight off the supplied USB, we're obviously downloading it off the internet. So we need to place it into what's called a slicer that's going to prep the STL and get it ready for print. So here's Anycubic Workshop, their proprietary slicer. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to give it a go and see how it stacks up against the big boys like Lychee, which I used to use, or Box, which is very popular. And you should get very familiar with this sort of software because you'll be in and out of it all the time when you take up this hobby, because this is where you download your STLs, you prep them on the build plate, which is this. Remember in the beginning where I said the build plate is actually upside down? So your models will be suspended against gravity like that. But to prep them, you always come in with things sort of facing up. If you've never used a 3D program before on a computer, it might take a little bit of getting used to learn the controls of moving things around and stuff, but you'll get used to it. So first off, you want to make sure that you're telling this software, whichever one it is, what printer you've got and what resin you're going to use. Because this is actually linked to my account, I can go up to the machine and it already had the Anycubic Photon Mono M7 Pro installed. But if not, or you're in another slicer program, you'll be able to find the add printer functionality wherever it is and just go through the list of printers. And obviously on the other third-party slicers, you'll have a list of all the other manufacturers. But in Workshop, you can add a custom, so you could probably add another printer manufacturer's setup there. So to add or change the resin, you simply click resin, select the resin from the list. These are all Anycubic ones, I believe. And if you want to change the exposure, like I did here, the default was 1.8. I want to go with 2.25. Having learned that from the RERF calibration, click OK. Close that down. You can see in the bottom right corner if you've got everything set up. So next, to get the model in, input model. A lot of the time, you're going to be greeted with a message like this, that there's some errors with the STL. Usually it means it's non-manifold. And what does that mean? It means it's got some kind of structural malformity within the 3D mesh and nothing really to be worried about. Every single slicer has a sort of automatic repair function. Right, so we've got our first model on the build plate. If you're new to resin 3D printing, here's a quick explanation of how it works. As opposed to FDM printing that prints this way up and a nozzle just builds up like that, resin builds upside down, suspended in a vat. This is your build plate and it gets dunked in the resin all the way down to the ACF film or FEP, whichever one you've got, until there's a layer thickness that you can set here. So it's 0.5 of a millimeter, which is extremely thin. And you can see that by dragging this slider on the right hand side all the way down, that will be your first layer. That's how thin it is. Tiny, tiny, tiny. The LCD screen will then light up just in that section there, and that will get cured. And then the next layer, the next layer, the next layer. And obviously each time, the build plate doesn't need to go as far into the resin itself as the height of the model gets built up until you're finally done. I'll go into supports a little bit later on the next model we're going to print. But for now, that's pretty much the principle. And because we don't need to add supports, because this is a sort of pre-supported model, as you can see on the sword there, because it's getting printed upside down and the handle of the sword is clearly going to be printed in midair, if these supports, these tooth-like structures weren't here, they need to come down from the last anchor point, which is the base of the model, and reach out and help this print without it just dropping off into the vat. And if it drops off into the vat, you can have a bit of cured resin between the build plate and the ACF. What's going to happen there is, especially if it's quite chunky, is your build plate's going to come down and it's going to squash against that bit of cured resin, and it could punch through the ACF film, which is obviously very bad. So I'm going to click slice. I'm going to get warnings to say that there's no supports added. And the reason for that is the supports are actually part of the model here, as you can see. These little teeth things holding up the ale and the mug. And because it's part of the model, the slicer doesn't know that they're actually supports. Because when you add supports, they're actually classed as a separate object that the slicer knows are supports. So you just got to overrule it because we know better. So it's asking you, do you want to add automatic supports for them before slicing? No, because it's designed to be supported already. So here is the instructions, or the picture that the LCD screen is going to project onto that tiny thin layer of resin that's going to be in contact with the build plate at first. So that's your first layer, all the way up to the top. Isn't that quite cool? And then you just save to file or cloud, whichever way you want to print. I'm going to do it to the USB disk. So let's go back over to the printer. Right, the next thing you want to do with a wash and cure station when you do a print is the UV resin, and give it its full power and make it grow up big and strong and be big boy resin. So this tiny thing here is only going to take about a minute. Right, so I love this little thing. How cool is this? So this sword, I mean, look at it, I mean, this is pretty cool. So we've got the cones of success. And I got the cones of failure. I think that all these cones of failure are supposed to fail. So the fact that I've got 3 of them successful means that perhaps something isn't right. I haven't got any calipers to check that that's 6mm, so I'll just do my best guess with some, with a measuring tape. The first thing I want to try is the little sword in the stone mini game. This thing should not fit in, I can't see any of those things. Okay, yeah, I can't obviously get the point in because it's tiny. But that's it. That won't go in. That won't go in, but it should go in. That one, and it does a nice, tight little fit. That's satisfying. It really is quite satisfying. This thing is the ale of Champions test or something like that. So this is meant to fit perfectly in the tankard. So let's have a look. Come on. Oh, that was snug as a mug of beer. Right. The sword and the ale thing, where you could not get better. So I'm going to go look online and see what these successful failures tell me. But yeah, that's quality. I'm going to keep that. I love that. That's quite cool. Okay, so I actually used ChatGPT to upload some images of the account of calibration. Explained the issue that the failure count had printed too well. That just meant that I was overexposing by about 0.1 or 0.2 of a second. So I'm just going to adjust that really quickly. I'm going to go down by a small increment of just 0.1. So it's 2.15 now. Now it's time to print our first real model in the form of a free miniature that actually comes with the cones of calibration to check that your setup is now fully working. So this guy's called Puck the Adventurer, and with nearly every SDL you get a pre-supported version and a non-supported version in case you want to put your own supports on. For the beginners, I would always go with the pre-supported and then transition over to adding your own supports little by little as you learn a little bit more. But for instance, you can see that this wouldn't print very well without supports because his foot there would just print in midair and drop off. Flat surfaces like bases like this, you can see they need to be angled. So just going to quickly show you the best thing we can do if we wanted to add supports. Select both of those, click supports, generate auto supports, unless you get to go up to these settings, but that's something that will come with time as you get more experience. But for this video, we'll just do automatic. And you can see it's done reasonably similar, picking up areas of the chin and under the hand and obviously the foot. But in interest of simplicity, just going to print the pre-supported ones. Nowadays, people that make the SDLs state that they test out the prints to make sure that they work and they have a great success rate. Right, let's get printed with your first real, actual model. You know what? I'm liking this printer, and I'm actually really liking the auto pump thing because I know it gets actually a little bit of hate online because of the difficulty with cleaning it and that kind of stuff. But I had an error, an automatic error, which is another good thing, saying that there was residue in the trough, or vat, they call it a trough. So usually you would have had to, well, I would have had to filter all the resin out of the trough or the vat into the bottle or a container or something and route it around for it. But with the pump, it's pumped it out. I don't know where it came from or what it is, but it's fallen off. So that was painless. And now I can fill it back up again and get cracking. That's really reassuring. Yeah, happy with that. And what I like to do, just to get rid of some of the IPA, to dry it off, is just blast it with your airbrush a bit. Also, no paint, just holding down the trigger, not pulling back the trigger, because you want all the IPA to have evaporated before you cure it. But before you cure it, there's one very important thing that we need to do. This is where we take the supports off, and as you can see, they're designed in such a way that they start off quite supported and reasonably thick, all the way up to tiny little points, so that should make them quite easy to pull off. So I think too much at once, as you'll end up taking away parts of the model by accident. And sometimes you might just see that it just gives out. You see these little bits, that's the sort of damage you can see from supports at times. So there is ways and settings you can get to minimize that, but we won't go into that on this video, and that's for a later video. Let's quickly cure it. I think for something so tiny, just a minute will be fine. I'm gonna lift the lid after about 30 seconds and just turn the models over, just to give them a little turn, put the lid back on. So there we go, folks. A really good print. I mean, really crisp exposures, pretty much bang on. The pre-supports worked absolutely fine, no problems there. But what I'm really happy about is the M7 Pro's heater, because when I used to have the Mono X, I just used to have so much inconsistency, or I'd have to sort of overexpose everything to make sure that it would work, because the heat of the resin wasn't consistent enough. And that's the word, I think. Having a heater in this printer just gives consistency, which gives peace of mind. Cutting to the chase, it's an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. The part of me that's got experience with the Mono X can see the big step up that this generation has over the old ones. But the part of me that's looking at this as though I'm a newcomer is still really pleasantly surprised at the whole experience, from setting it up, calibration, to getting your first prints out. So it definitely has got my 100% recommendation. The heated vat for me seems to be a bit of a game changer, going back to what I remember for the Mono X days. So that kind of bitter taste I had in my mouth from years ago of using a resin printer definitely has been cleansed by just the addition of the vat heater that comes with the M7 Pro. Yes, the pump was useful actually in ways that I didn't actually expect, where it made sorting out a print failure a lot quicker. But in its primary function, it still seems a little bit slapped on. The ease of which I've been able to get from a kind of standing start to up and running with the Anycubic M7 Pro 100% has changed my mind that there is a space for a resin printer by Anycubic or whoever in my hobbyist setup. If you want to see some of the things I've created in FDM in more detail, then head over to my channel and take a look through that. I go through everything from editing the STL to get better prints in things like Blender, to all the print settings and orientations, and then finally onto construction, post-processing and painting. So remember to leave a like, a comment, share, subscribe, hit the alert button for notifications, and come back and join me for the next video with the M7 Pro, where I tackle a bigger project and go through more advanced stuff in a lot more detail. Right, I've had enough of IPA alcohol for a few days now. I'm gonna go and find some of the more fun alcohol. I'm gonna get me a few beers. Catch you next time.